turn the key, let it roll it. Belly on the line, got a head full of miles and a better way to climb.
Welcome to Our Living Young. It's a beautiful day here in Idaho that we're sitting in Rigby, Idaho, and enjoying just this fantastic weather. We just went on a plane ride up over by the Grand Teton National Park, Grand Tetons. We didn't go over the Grand Tetons into Wyoming. We stayed in the Idaho side. But we're up here in a beautiful area. I'm our pilot, and a cousin of mine and a great friend is Colter Hansen. He owns this little hangar in here with all these fun little toys, as you see in the background, but he's done extremely well for himself. You know, you're raised in Afton, Wyoming. You had entrepreneuring parents, and you know, most kids in that setting, all they want to do is be raised, and I'm from Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and then I moved down to Afton, Wyoming my sophomore year in high school. And so I lived in a small town for a period. A lot of the different people, friends of ours that went to high school, they just said they want to get out of this town. They want to get somewhere. And your parents have done an amazing job of the entrepreneuring. They had the radio station and a couple businesses up there. Your grandfather owned the Ford dealership since the 60s, and the Honda dealership. And great-great-grandma owned the Valley-On Hotel. Now it's Colter's, but she owned that. I mean,
it's not mine. It's called Colter's Lodge.
Colter's Lodge.
But
that's right. I didn't even put that together.
But it isn't Colter's, unfortunately. Maybe that'll change one day.
Maybe it could. Go back and buy it for Grandma Horsley.
Yeah, but then I'd have to change it back to Valley On. It couldn't stay Colter's Lodge if I owned it.
I don't know, it's kind of magic. It was just a drive through Afton, Wyoming to get to, and it's the largest Elkhorn arch that goes over the main street, which is US 89, 4-lane going right through the town. And then you're on your way to Jackson Hole, in an hour and a half you're in Jackson. So they're great towns to be raised in. I loved it. You took it from that point, and what made you get into the entrepreneurial spirit of yourself, of what you've done? We'll get into what you've done. You've done a lot. We'll get into a little more of that, but what got into your mind to want to do entrepreneurial stuff and stick around more of a smaller town, and you're raising your family here now?
Yeah, so home is always going to be Star Valley, Wyoming, Afton, Wyoming, where I grew up. But home has definitely become in Idaho Falls, Idaho. And I mean, the reasons why I became an entrepreneur, they vary, but I would say that it comes down to probably 2 or 3 reasons. One is I love sales and negotiation and putting a deal together, and I mean, what better to do all of that inside of real estate? And early on in my career, I was blessed to be introduced to a company that they had a full education system around real estate investing, not becoming a real estate agent, you know, but being an investor. And so for me, real estate was a great catalyst to becoming an entrepreneur and investing and creating passive income. And because I've done that and created that passive income, I've then been able to invest in other businesses, which includes, you know, service-based companies and an AI automation company. I've built and sold a marketing agency. And so that variety of things has come because of the stability that real estate and the passive income has created for me.
So go one step back. Did you go to college?
I did go to college.
Where'd you go?
So I started at Western Wyoming Community College. And I was there for a semester. It was just long enough for Paige and I to
you met there.
Me after high school, and for us to get engaged, and then we got married shortly after the semester that I was there. And then we moved to Pocatello, Idaho, where she got into pharmacy school, and I got my master's degree in accounting, and then got my CPA license. And so I have a background in accounting, and I do just about anything but accounting today.
But you oversee accountants that are taking care of your business.
I do, yeah. No,
And you understand it. But to add on to that question, though, is once you graduate with your master's in accounting, traditionally everybody in your class goes out and finds that job.
They do.
That great accounting job. For some big corporation, they hopefully, public, or where they can get shares, whatever it is. You took a different path. You didn't use that degree to get a job. You used it in your entrepreneurial spirit. And how's that helped you?
Yeah, so I actually did get a job early on. And
you did have a job?
Yeah, so I worked for a couple of big companies. I was doing international accounting and global expansion, and I loved it. They sent me all over the world. I saw so many things. I mean, I've been to India and Australia and Germany and Mexico and all these in a business setting, and I feel really fortunate for that being a part of my career, because you learn from businesses that they've already created the infrastructure,
right?
And they are machines, and you're simply a cog inside of that machine to help propel it forward. But I feel really fortunate that I was able to be a part of those companies because of that. Because now I can implement the processes, the systems into my own businesses, having learned from those who have created $1 billion+ organizations. So entrepreneurial path, I mean, first is I knew that I wanted to be an investor. I knew that I wanted to create passive income, and what more do we want than time freedom and financial freedom? And those are the things that I was seeking. And one of the early goals that I set in my career was I'd buy one property every single year. And that's while I was working in a corporate job, but then it turned into 4 properties, and then it turned into 12 properties, and then it turned into 40 in a year. And
so you put those in a portfolio, you didn't buy and flip, you're buying and holding in a portfolio?
I am.
Got it.
Yeah. And buy and hold is what I think I'm best at. I'm really good at buying stuff. I'm not so good at selling anything. I mean,
you emotionally get attached to it a little.
I don't know about emotionally, and actually I love a phrase around emotion in business is fall in love with the numbers and then fall in love with the project, or fall in love with the numbers and then fall in love with the deal.
Yeah. But don't emotionally get wrapped up so tight that you can't sell that property.
Exactly.
If the deal comes along that's right. It's like I was wrapped up in the property down in Glendale, Arizona, right next to the stadium, $1 billion water resort being built right next to us. The guy that was building that $1 billion water resort came over and offered us money that was astounding money. And we had already built 200 apartments there. We were building 1,200 apartments there. And I looked at the 200 apartments we built and the cash that he was offering, and I don't think I need to build the other 1,000 apartments.
Yeah,
I'm good. you got to understand, fall in love with the numbers and understand your numbers and keep moving with those numbers, and let that number be a lot of your decision making in business. And that's what I found is so important, is emotionally people are getting so wrapped up, and then the numbers are going down, but they love the project, their business or something so much they're not willing to do whatever it takes to get those numbers up, because they just love the business, they don't want to lose it, and they don't want to change.
And that almost does a disservice to the business if they're holding on to it emotionally, but they're not focused on it from a metrics and accountability standpoint.
Right.
And I think about your apartment complex. I mean, sure, if you were to build out another 1,000 units, there's certainly more money that could have been made, but that guy gave you your walkaway price where you were happy with that. Everything's for sale at the right price. Everything tangible, right? And so if you think about everything being, for sale at the right price, I can project out, like, this project's going to take me another 3 to 5 years to build out 1,000 units. Well, if I can get this price today, what's the time value of money? What's the ability to jump in a Sprinter van like this and be able to go anywhere and not have to worry about building the next 100 or 200 or the 1,000 units?
Right.
And that's something that we all seek, in my opinion. And this idea of retirement at age 65, I think, is absolutely ludicrous. I want to retire now, but I'm okay working my butt off so that I can do things that I would have otherwise had to wait until I was retired. And
right. Okay, now shifting over to properties versus companies. What is the difference between buying a real estate property and buying a company, and what do you prefer?
That's a really great question. What do I
You
prefer?
dipped your toes into both of them in a heavy way.
Yeah. You know what? There's pros and cons to each. If I were to think of like what's easy, today real estate is easy for me. And I find it fascinating that we will work for somebody else for 40 years in preparation for retirement, and we'll build plenty of things in that 40 years, but then at the end of the 40 years, the only thing that we have left is the percentage of whatever we allocated into a retirement account. It's not a percentage of the business that we operated in. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of why people will transition from one company to another company to another company, is they don't ever find home where it's like, hey, you know what, this is something that I want to build long into the future. So if I were to come back to the preferences of real estate versus buying businesses, from a strict like cash flow, easy to set up, easy to buy, just because transactionally it's pretty straightforward, I would say real estate is a preferred thing for me, because that allows me the most time freedom and flexibility to be able to step away from it and just let it continue to cash flow and send me that mailbox money every single month.
Love that mailbox money.
Oh, I love that mailbox money. It's so nice.
And that's residual income that's just coming in passively. For example, on the apartments, they're paying the rent every single month. So that would be money just coming in every single month. They're just paying the rent. And you just happen to own it. So those 200 units I owned down there, they're average $1,500 an apartment. Well, 1,500 times 2,000 or 200 apartments, you can put the math to that. That's the mailbox money. Now you did have some overhead, and the office staff and such, real estate, the loan, just the variables that you've got along the way. But there's some great passive income coming in from that. And so I can see what you're saying on the real estate side. And in our hedge fund, the biggest bucket we had was real estate, because it's so easy for us to analyze it and get the specs off of other properties that are around there. And you can gauge what the value of that property is you're looking at, either giving a loan on or buying one way or another. And it was the easiest ones to actually lend on that we could do.
You bet.
And you had the collateral, you knew that they had skin in the game, because they had to have 20, 25, 30% of the money in before we put a loan on it. So we knew that it was undervalued, and they had 30% of their money in. So they have skin in the game. They're not going to let it go away. But if they did let it go, and we got a couple back, we were in good shape. We were 50% loan to value on that, 40% loan to value. That's a pretty good situation to be in.
It is.
And so you just got to look at real estate's a very easy one. Whereas the corporate side, we'd always have to be looking at, what their numbers were, where they're projected to go, how are they going to achieve that projection to get in the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years out, and what variables could come in that could shift that around. Mm-hmm. You're constantly analyzing the company and the competition and what's going on around in the area and the market. What's the market doing? Is this going to be hit by a depression or a recession? Is this a depression proof? Or what are all those variables? So there's a lot to look at in companies.
There is, and there's lots to manage in companies.
And lots to manage. You got employees, and you got inventory. You're always worried about theft. You're worried about so many different variables in there. Mm-hmm. So real estate is the easiest in my mind. Also, as we were working for the last 30 years, had a hedge fund in Salt Lake City and Phoenix, and it was simpler, much simpler than that.
So if I were to come back to businesses, because I can't say that real estate is necessarily my favorite, just because it's, and I say easier, it's a lot of work still. Like it's not. It isn't just like this shoe in, you're going to make money 100%. But once it's set up, it works, and it works long term. From a business standpoint, what I like about businesses is in a piece of property that rents for $1,500 a month, if it's a single family house, rents for $1,500 a month, it's going to be really hard for me to double that rent in any short period of time.
Right.
I have to work off of inflation and standard rent increases and increases in my own cost, and so I am limited on how much growth I can create out of that property in both rental income and in valuation. But in business, I can either take it to zero, or I can increase it 100-fold. And it comes off of if I have good marketing in place and I'm, managing my cost per acquisition, and I'm managing my sales team so that they'll have a higher close rate, and I'm booking, as many calls as I possibly can. If I can manage all of that, and then I go and deliver a good service, man, I'm going to be able to increase that business. I can take it from, let's say it was doing $150,000 in sales, and I take it to $300,000 in sales. Well, I just increased my revenue that much, but I probably increased my profit at 2.5 to 3 times that, because I've not increased my overhead at the same rate as my revenue. And what I like about that is I create this net operating income. Well, that net operating income is then multiplied by a multiple that big companies will pay. And I can increase my value from, I buy a company for $2 million, I increase it by 10x what it was, and I can probably get a 20 or a 30x multiple out of that original purchase.
Right. And
that's the value of investing in companies, and doing that with our employees. They see, they're going to spray the crops. So what I'm looking at is, if I can take an asset and I can increase its value by tenfold, well, I've created an asset class that is much more productive from a standpoint of than my real estate, and so the opportunity is higher. There's more risk, of course, because there is more to manage. But I really like working with the people that I work with. I really like, the customers that we get to serve. When a friend of mine uses one of my companies and says, hey, Jesse came out, he took really good care of me, and he was able to solve my problem in an hour, and I was really frustrated because I couldn't get anybody there for like 3 days if you guys wouldn't have shown up. Or another will comment about an employee, Ron, and they're just like, he did everything that I needed him to do. He showed up to our house in Island Park, and he took care of our issue, and we're able to keep our Airbnb guests really happy and didn't have to cancel our reservation because we didn't have water. Like, those are the kinds of things that are like, oh man, that keeps me moving in business.
Nice pat on the back, and feels good.
For sure.
It really feels good.
And I didn't show up to take care of those customers, but because I've enabled really incredible professionals and they take pride in their work, I get to take pride in the fact that we were able to help set up a system that could serve the people in my community.
How great is that? So Colter, now looking at, let's just say, mental pressure. You're in business and you're not an employee. The bottom line is you. Mm-hmm. And decisions come, and it's you only. You can ask for input, but you get in the face of a lot of different opportunities, and when that mental pressure comes at you and it's a real risk right in front of your face, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So it's my strong belief that because as a business owner and as the business owner, the buck stops with me. Mm-hmm. So when we run into issues, of course we have a process that our employees can follow in order to solve the issues. But just this morning, I was informed that a client doesn't want to pay a $30,000 bill. I'm like, well, it's not really up to them. We provided the service, and I got all the details, and I understood, what the customer's concerns were, and ultimately they froze a piece of equipment for not maintaining it properly. It ran for an entire year. It did, everything that it was expected to do, but they didn't manage it and maintain it according to the specifications. But now they want to push that back on us. Well, I'm sitting next to my accounts payable and a gal and my operations guy over here, and we're just like, well, we're not going to just unload this onto Tara, not because she couldn't handle it, but because of how rude the customer was to our operators.
Oh boy.
And so I was like, well, that's just fine. I will call and we will share words, and I will kindly allow for him to go ahead and pay his bill.
Kindly allow it. I like that.
Because at the end of the day, like, me unloading that onto our AP clerk would be unfair because of what I know about the customer. And because she manages 99 really pleasant customers on any given day, to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to do the collection on it, I'm going to make sure that I take payment, et cetera, et cetera. But that one is going to end up on me because I can manage that. And so I think I'm okay with that because I want our customers to know that I will be present when I need to be. If any of those other 99 customers needed for me as the owner to show up, I would. But I can't scale and grow a business if I'm dealing with every customer issue. And so coming back to risk and the mental capacities, I truly believe that the opportunity of a lifetime comes around but once a week.
I like that. Once a week. The opportunity of a lifetime, once a week, it's there. I love that.
And so when I think about individuals that I talk to on a regular basis, or they want to take me to lunch and talk about business or talk about investing in real estate, the difference in mindset that I feel like I have compared to many people is that I believe the opportunity is going to present itself, but I have to be ready to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And luck is simply a matter of preparation meeting opportunity.
Absolutely. That's a great point. You know, you got a door over here, you got a big door here. You know, the door opens. Are you willing to walk through the door? I see so many of my friends in the past that says, oh, you had a great hedge fund, you did all these things. Well, same thing, the opportunity was there. If you're prepared and you're looking and you say, and you can evaluate and really understand it, and you walk through the door, you can pull the door shut and say, hey, I don't want to do anything more. Mm-hmm. I'm busy, I'm at capacity. The opportunity went down the street, and one of your buddies or somebody else, your competition, somebody picked that up, and now what are they doing with it? And it's been so interesting to see deals that we've passed on in the hedge fund industry, deals that we've passed on and where they are today, and you see some of them that have absolutely exploded. You're going, oh my gosh, we could have had that. Yeah. And ours is limited by, the capital you have at the time, a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And so you do have to pass on, but you want to be a part of. So you bring it to another hedge fund and say, hey, we're willing to participate in this because we like it so much, but we've only got X capital put into it today. Yeah. And then we can join in it. But you got to be willing to think and negotiate and understand and move. The big thing is moving and not just waiting and thinking and wondering and should I, shouldn't I? You got to do it. Mm-hmm. There's a time that the old Nike phrase, just do it. We always said, just do it. And that's been a big thing for us over the years. Yeah. So how do you got a lot of mental stimulation that's coming at you and risk. How do you work with that risk? I'll say it that way on a mental side. Yeah.
I think it's a compartmentalization of the different tasks that I have to meet in any given day. If I had to deal with customer inquiries or booking calls all day long, I could definitely do that. If that was my only task, I think I bet I could take our 50% booking rate to 70% booking, just simply because I would be able to focus on that one task. And that I would allow for no other distractions. But for me, I know that my highest and best use of time is meant to work with our investors, work with our vendors, and negotiating better terms and making sure that we're managing our cost of goods sold. And so the more conversations that I can have with those groups of individuals, the more productive it's going to be for the company. And so when I get a call, like this morning I got a text from a friend like, hey, my air conditioner went out. And I was like, I'm going to tell Amanda, and Amanda's going to call you, and she's going to give you the Colter special, and we're going to make sure we get you taken care of, right? So within 3 minutes, she's calling him and saying, hey, I'm ready to take care of you.
Instead of Colter having to handle the whole thing all the way through, your best and use time for you is not to take that all the way through, but to hand it off to somebody and say, she'll take care of you.
For sure. She's been trained to do that. It's not that I couldn't do it, but
Right.
you better believe that I would fumble through the software that we manage the customer in. Our customer wouldn't get the same experience if I was trying to manage it from start to finish. But if I follow the process and I hand it off to Amanda, and Amanda now takes care of that customer the way that I've seen her do it time and time again, and then she hands that off to Jesse that goes and actually does the work, and then Jesse comes back and says, okay, this is the work that I did, and the invoice goes out, the customer has the product that they need. Now, if I were to fumble through all of that, my customer would know that I was taking care of them because I would communicate really well, but I would have to communicate around the fumbles that I was making. And so the compartmentalization of the tasks, I think, is really important, and I say that because there's simply a process to every single thing that we do in the business.
Right.
And if I'm not managing those things, or if I'm not training to those things, then I have to insert myself in, and it's going to go a little bit slower until I find somebody that can do it faster than me. And so I would say that's
a great way of you handle that mental stress that comes to you on a daily basis. You just compartmentalize it and hourly look at different situations you're in.
Yeah.
Now, we just went on the airplane, and flying the airplane takes a lot of knowledge, understanding, and education. Does that help with your business, that you've been able to come out here and, let's just say, turn off the business and turn on the airplane and get away from everything? But does it also help you on, it's kind of a two-part question, does it also help you really be thinking of the business, or ways that you can do business? Has the plane got any variance to that?
So I think piloting an airplane has many similarities to running a business. I mean, you think about your gauges on the dash, and all of the indicators that are telling you, okay, how high are you above sea level? What is your airspeed? What is your fuel? And you have all of these gauges as to what is propelling you forward, how many RPMs, what is the power band, what's our manifold pressure. All of those things are telling you something about the airplane and about your flight that is saying you're either safe or you're in trouble, right? And so I want to look at those indicators, and I want to keep them always in the safe zone, right? Because if I'm in trouble, I'm going to fix something really fast. And I think that's the problem that we get into when we're running a business, is that we're just imagining ourselves being safe all the time, that we're just good. And we're not looking at the gauges like, hey, you know what? Maybe some things are awry. How do I fix that? And if I fix that, how do I get back into the safe zone of productivity and growth and, training an employee because something was falling behind? And if I don't have the proper indicators and gauges to tell me which direction to take the business, then it's going to be in danger of losses on either specific projects or as a whole in the company, and that's damaging to employee morale, it's damaging to the company overall, it doesn't abide by loan covenants, and then you just have a cascading effect of challenges if you're not paying attention to how the business is operating.
Yeah, for sure. And this is kind of a twist on that, is, do you think being raised in a small town, and you've got Afton, Wyoming, small town, entrepreneur parents, do you think you have advantages in business? Look at those gauges versus, say, a big city kid who comes out and tries to do what you're doing with portfolio companies and buying them and building. And do you think there's an advantage or disadvantage, or?
I wouldn't say there's an advantage or a disadvantage to anybody that grows up in a 3-person town to a 3 million person town. And I say that not because every person is equally capable, but has equal amounts of opportunities. But I've seen some of the most hardworking people do it way faster and way better than me, And it's not because they had the best education, but they forced it into existence. But when I look at, myself, I also think that education is critical, and it doesn't mean you have to get a 4-year degree or a master's degree or a doctorate degree to be successful in business. In fact, I've talked to some of the dumbest smart people out there, and I'm just like, that doesn't work. Like we can go through this theoretically our entire existence, but if you forget to look at the pragmatic and logical and realistic standpoints, like a book doesn't necessarily tell the whole story.
Right.
And so I think everyone seeing or accepting the fact that they have an equal opportunity to succeed in business, in real estate, in life, in health. Health might be a different factor. People are impacted by different health issues. So that one isn't as equal in my opinion. But if somebody has a good mind and, capable hands and feet and the ability to propel themselves forward physically, I think mentally they have to allow themselves to manage either people or processes or systems that will allow for them to be able to grow. And I love growing up in a small town. I thought that was awesome. I loved being able to change pipe by hand. No. At the moment, I didn't love changing pipe at the time.
And pipe, we're talking about that. That's the water pipe for the farming of a ranch or a farm.
Yeah, these big pivots that do it automatically, those didn't exist when we were kids. But that was a real blessing for me because of the work ethic that it created. And mom and dad including us in different projects and, painting the radio station, and maintaining that facility as, that was their business. Like little things like that allowed and afforded me opportunities that some other people wouldn't have in the big city potentially. Right. But if somebody in the big city was driven and was like, hey, you know what? I've got 1,000 apartments above and below me, and I'm going to go door knocking, and I'm going to sell them little trinkets, like they could have an opportunity in that. Right. It doesn't mean that they're going to go change pipe anytime soon, but if they were willing to work and they're willing to put their mind to something, they can achieve anything. And so I don't know that I had any greater opportunity coming from a small town, but I also think it comes back to mindset. Yeah. And introducing this idea of an opportunity of a lifetime comes around but once a week. It's simply a mindset thing. Yeah. It trains my brain to be ready for the opportunity when it slaps me in the face. And I have emails, like there's stuff that comes across my desk and in my email, I would say almost daily. And I truly can see 2 to 3 transactions that I could create out of those opportunities that could be opportunities of a lifetime. I don't take advantage of all of them. I would love to, give me $100 million behind me, and there's no reason why I can't go capitalize on more deals and have more conversations. But I've been largely self-funded and done it from not the school of hard knocks, like learning from good people and then implementing those strategies and just doing it as fast as my own resources have allowed. But you give me a fund behind me and I could go 10 times faster.
Do a lot of stuff. Interesting. And my dad was a huge entrepreneur. He had 15 businesses in Jackson, drive-ins and chuck wagons and a scenic view chairlift and these big old general stores. But he got his master's degree at Utah State University, and he always came back and told us as kids, he says, you know what, education is so important. Get your education. But one of the biggest things in business, use your common sense. He was always just, use your common sense. What would you do? What would drive you into the business? What would make you feel comfortable coming into that business? Just common sense wise, how could you grow that business? What is needed coming out of Grand Teton National Park? My dad had the businesses, and these are people from back east or anywhere else. Fireworks are coming to Jackson Hole for. They're coming into Wyoming. They could buy firecrackers. And he had the very first firecracker stand right there, and he just built that up and big. The gas station, they need gas. They've been coming out of these parks, and there's no gas stations. guess what? I'll have a self-serve. He had the first self-serve gas station come out of Grand Teton on the Yellowstone National Park. He says the common sense of what you do, he says, it'd be stupid for me to have, and he'd name off some ridiculous thing, that'd be right there. He said it'd be ridiculous for me to have X, Y, or Z right there. That's not the best use of my money, my time, my efforts, but things that people want, need, and use, and are happy that you're providing it, and they feel good after they left you, is just common sense stuff to do. Mm-hmm. And so it's going right along with your line it's just smart and business sense, and you got to look at it and what could be provided to them, but then make them happy after they left. As you said with the air conditioner individual or a plumber or anything else, is make sure they're happy when they leave yours. My dad was always, thanks a lot, folks. Come back again. He was always, thanks a lot, folks. He always had a smile and wave at them when they were leaving the store or the gas station, or help them go pump their gas, or it's a self-serve gas station, but just go out there and just help. If you see a lady out there, go pump her gas for her. Just common sense stuff that make you happy and them happy, and they return to you. And my dad had Bill Bailey's Frontierland, and he'd always building up the song, Bill Bailey, won't you please come home? And he just had the characters of him as Bill Bailey, and he wanted to make sure that they felt great when they left. So Colter, you're running a lot of things. Your full portfolio of real estate, businesses. You've got a family, you're 5 kids now. You're flying plane. You're doing so much. What does your daily rhythm look like? How do you feel? How do you manage all that?
So the daily rhythm starts with a workout. Really, like it's waking up, it's giving thanks to God, it's going to the gym, and staying physically fit. And I know you have your 4 pillars.
4 pillars, right.
I focused on 3, which is health, wealth, and relationships. And I really think that in those things, this trifecta of focus is, if I'm not healthy, then it's difficult for me to focus on wealth building or my relationships. And my relationships are relationship with God, relationship with family, relationship with friends, relationship with employees and managers and and associates and etc.
Right down to neighbors.
Yeah, and the neighbors, But so for me, it has to have those 3 in the day. So waking up, being active, moving the body, getting the creaks and the groans out of the knees and elbows and whatever else, I think is really important. And then really I usually plan my day at the end of the day prior, and I've got a to-do list, and I used to do it on paper. I use a platform now, and I go through and I say, okay, what are the most critical things that I have to do tomorrow? And so then I'll focus on those very first thing in the morning. After we've done scripture study as a family, I eat breakfast about half of the time, but I get right to the office, which I have an office in my home. I have an office in a couple of the other different offices. And so my focus is do the hard thing first. And
love that.
Once the hard things are done, then you get to do the fun things. And so the sooner I'm done with the hard things, then I get to work on all the other fun things. And so that's been a good rhythm for me.
Way you're the trifecta.
Yeah.
Mine's just saying the 4 pillars. We're saying the same thing.
We are, yeah.
And it's just so important in life to do that and to do it consistently. So often we talk about that balance in life, and you get very, very, let's say, spiritual, and you're going to church and you're helping your neighbors and you're doing all this stuff, but you're losing the balance of your emotion of your family. You lose that, or your business of what you're doing on that side. Mm-hmm. Or you're not working out. You're not doing something for your body it's a temple of God is what I say. And you've got to build that temple of God to be able to let God help you move and keep moving and doing the things you do on a daily basis. So any follow-up to your trifecta?
You know, you mentioned the word balance, and I like that idea, but I think of balance as this, like the weight scale, and you have the teetering of the two of like, okay, well, if I'm focused on family, then that means something else is out of balance.
No.
And I think about something more along the lines of a work-life harmony. And work-life harmony to me is that not everything gets an equal amount of focus. It doesn't get the equal amount of weight. Now, there are some, family, in my opinion, is more important than work. But if I don't work, then I can't support the family. And so the idea of I'm going to be with and only with the family all the time means that something else has fallen out of balance in support of the things that are most important to me.
Right.
And so this work-life harmony is really different for every person.
Yes.
But that harmony is based on, okay, what is my rhythm? What is my focus? What do I intentionally want to do and accomplish? And how does that support the mission of my health, my wealth, and my relationships? And that to me, I think is critical to analyze that on a regular basis, do a reassessment. A lot of people who do New Year's resolutions, I review my goals and objectives and my focuses and vision boards on an annual basis, but I also do it quarterly, and then I see a monthly, and then I see some of it on a daily basis to make sure that I keep an intentional perspective on what I'm trying to accomplish in a year and who I'm focused on.
Very, very good. Just as a wrap up now, Colter's been great speaking with you and just hanging out, flying with you and going over to Victor and Driggs and seeing the Tetons, and it's just a lot of fun.
This has been a lot of fun.
It has. Now, just as a wrap up, if 20 years from now, people are talking about Colter Hansen, and they bring up your name and they talk about you, what do you want them to remember you as? Not your businesses, you personally as, and what do you want them to be talking about you and saying? Ideally.
Yeah, so in 20 years, hopefully I'm not gone and they have to talk about the past Colter. But I do think about this often is that if somebody's been on the journey with Colter, I want them to be grateful for the journey they were on. And when I think about building businesses or buying real estate and building real estate portfolios, that's of course a means to an end, and it's tangible and it's material, but it also allows for me to bless more people because I cannot give what I do not have.
Right.
And so if I don't create, I cannot give. And I think about God and what He has created, and you think about this probationary state that He put us in so that we could be tried and see how we did and focusing back on Him and taking ourselves back to God. I think about this probationary state, and He could have made it a lot more miserable than He did. But He created valleys and mountains and trees and streams and just the most beautiful earth that has an ecosystem that supports life in a way that can be and is really comfortable if you'll simply pursue and seek the best things that it has to offer. And so when I think about what I want to be remembered as, is I want to be remembered as a creator. Now, I don't compare myself to God, but if God is a creator and He wants me to be like Him, I should be creating and I should be building and I should be growing something that is more than what just Colter can do and create, but it's allowing and creating other opportunities for other people to create as well. And that means that we serve through providing products and services, and that means that there's profits that are created, and it means that it has a temporal view of creation, but then what that allows is for there to be more to be created. And a lot of people will look at capitalism as if it's, it doesn't have an altruism to it. And there's a lot of capitalism that maybe isn't altruistic. But capitalism would, if you were to compare and think of some individuals and what they would expect out of an entrepreneur, is that a lot of people would rather an entrepreneur give $100,000 to charity than to create 10 opportunities to create an additional $100,000.
Right.
And so for me, I want to create opportunities for more people to create more. And actually, one of my goals in the next 2 years is I want to create $1 billion worth of portfolio value, not that Colter owns solely, but I create 1,000 millionaires.
Oh, cool. That is really a cool thing that we could then turn around and talk about in 20 years.
Yeah, I would think that in 20 years, those 1,000 people will be grateful for the few principles that I introduced them to of, what they can do to create their own $1 million portfolio. Because that's all I'm looking to is I want one person multiplied by 1,000, but I want that one person to create $1 million portfolio. Because what does that do for them in 20 years? What opportunities does that afford them? Where do they get to serve in a better way in 20 years because they created that $1 million portfolio?
That's great. That is great. Well, Colter, thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
The opportunity to be able to come in here and speak with Colter and be able to fly with him today and just have a very, very enjoyable, great experience today. Thank you.